Hi, everyone. Welcome to You Got This, a new Indy Parenting Zoom series. My name is Tyler Hayden. I'm one of the senior editors here at The Independent, and I'm very happy to have with us Sarah Powers, a Santa Barbara mom of three, elementary, middle, and high school.
That's right.
Correct?
One of each this
One of
year.
each. And she is the co-host of the Mom Hour, which is a great podcast that is really practical, real life, down in the trenches, fun podcast about tips for moms, advice for moms, consults with experts. It's really a great way to feel less alone in this wonderful, difficult journey of
Yeah.
parenthood. And we're happy to have her because she's been a regular contributor to Indie Parenting. You maybe seen some of her stories about holiday photos and a bunch of other topics. And what they do on a national level, she and her co-host, I think they've racked up about 700 episodes now,
That's
maybe
right.
more, and 15 million something downloads. What they do on a national level, we're really trying to do here at an Indie Parenting level, which is create community around parenting and the questions that come up, and again all the topics that maybe people are nervous to talk about. We will talk about. So Sarah, thank you for being here. I gave a little intro to your podcast, but talk to us a little bit more about it. Give us a little
Yeah.
sense of how you got going, when you launched, and why.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me, Tyler. And thank you for just making me part of indie parenting. Like you said, the work that I do reaches parents on a national and even international level. But I moved back to my hometown of Santa Barbara 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago. And I felt like I was missing a way to connect into the parenting media landscape here in town. And then up popped indie parenting. So I'm really happy to be here. So the Mom Hour as a podcast and a business, which I co-created with Megan Francis, my business partner, will be 9 in March. So in parenting years, that would be a third grader. My podcast is a third grader this year. That puts us way back in 2015, which I don't know if the podcasts were on your radar back then, but Serial Productions, like the podcast Serial launched in October of 2014, and we were March of 2015. So this was
Oh,
back
wow.
when most people did not know what a podcast was, unless you had a really niche interest or were super techie or and Megan really had the vision to reach moms through podcasting. She was an early listener of podcasts, and she was like, I think moms are going to want this and need this. They're either commuting to their jobs, they're at home with little kids with their, earphones in, doing stuff around the house. It's podcast makes you feel kind of intimately connected to whoever you're listening to. And we all
Yep.
know that now. It's so obvious now, but this is 9 years ago almost. So it was kind of humble beginnings. We came together. We were both writers and bloggers. And so we had worked together professionally before the podcast, but really I don't think we didn't know what we didn't know when we started it. It started very small and it caught on pretty quickly. It was clearly serving a need for moms who wanted to be kept company, wanted to listen to smart conversations. We kind of sit in a middle place between, we're not experts, we're regular moms who happen to have a lot of kids. Megan has 5 and I have 3. So we don't have any clinical expertise. We're not preaching to people on exactly the right way to do things, but we've also logged a lot of time doing this. So I think we have some authority in just our experience.
Yeah.
And so it's been going ever since. Like you said, we're almost 9 years. We have a team of contributing voices now to kind of broaden the stories we're able to talk about. And as you said, we bring on experts occasionally. But the backbone of the podcast is Megan and I talking about our own motherhood experiences and hopefully broadening that to include a more kind of universal experience.
Cool. Well, I want to hear about how you guys choose your topics. I just was listening to an episode that was really great, and I don't want to give too many spoilers away, but is parenting harder or easier for parents these days than it was 10, 15, 20 years ago? And so like how did that come about? Like was that a
Yeah.
question that a listener asked, or were you guys just brainstorming?
So I would say there's a couple common ways. Sometimes it's something from within our own life. And in this case, it was Megan. She's remarried recently and she has some grown stepkids. And one of those grown stepkids just had a baby. So she, I believe, is a grandmother
Mhm.
at the ripe young age of 40 something. And so as in that role, she was really seeing up close and personal a couple of brand new parents, young parents, and all of the gear and the gadgets they had and all the questions they had. So
Right.
that one came about through her own personal experience. I would say another really common way is hearing from our community. Sometimes somebody writes in with a question. We also
Mm.
have a Facebook group with a few thousand moms in it. And even when we're not weighing in on every thread and giving them advice, but we see what the conversation is. They're mostly talking to each other and supporting one another. Like, my 4-year-old like gets up to use the bathroom 10 times before bed. Like, what do I do? And they're actually helping and coaching and validating each other. But because of that, we notice what types of questions and issues come up again and again. So sometimes it's something from one of our lives. Sometimes it comes from the community. Sometimes it's something that's happening out in the world that we just happen to be noticing. We both
Mhm.
come from that editorial background that you have as well. So it becomes like a sixth sense or something, just like what is the thing that people are talking about right now, or what do we want to talk about?
Right. One of the things I appreciated is you guys definitely stay away from kind of the super controversial, clickbaity, hot take type topics, and that would be an easy trap to fall in for anybody
Sure.
who's, trying to get listeners and trying to build an audience. Was Talk about that conscious decision on
Yeah.
your guys' part.
I think part of it is that both of us, the way we're wired, we're wired to kind of look for nuance and see multiple sides to a question. Yes, there are some really divisive topics in parenting, from really small ones to really important big ones. And I don't think it's not that we're afraid to have those conversations. I just think we want to give them the respect they deserve. And we want to we want to include as many parents as possible in our podcast. And not everybody's going to like us. And people who listen, I'm sure, can read between the lines and figure out what we think on certain big ticket issues if they really wanted to. But it's never been our aim to take a hard stance on the best way to be a good mom. And in the end, I think that's what a lot of those, like they used to call them mommy wars back in the day, but really it was like you said, to get clicks on an article and to sort of make people pick a camp. And I just think motherhood is so difficult and challenging already. I don't think we need to be forced to pick a side unnecessarily. So we have kind of stayed away from those topics. And that doesn't mean we don't bring up challenging topics and have, I guess, we do have some meaty philosophical conversations, but we try to keep them as inclusive as possible. And there's other places. If you want hot takes and
Right.
like, this celebrity like said this about how they're, going to breastfeed their child till they're 10, like there's somebody's going to talk about that. It's just
Yeah.
not us.
Yeah, there's plenty of that out there already. But speaking of nuance, I mean, that episode that I just mentioned about parents having it easier or harder, people may not be surprised. There's no one answer. A lot of the things we kind of take for granted now, as newer parents like myself, social media and and sort of mass marketing and social media marketing. It's really interesting how you guys talked about the double-edged sword aspect, of all those points. And I found myself um, I found myself thinking of very specific examples of what you guys talk about with products that are solving problems that you didn't even know was a problem, and how it can make things more convenient and easier. But does that mean better?
Right.
Or like, is convenient always better?
Right.
Is taking the shortest path always better for yourself as a parent? Because I mean, I feel like sometimes as a parent, the most meaningful and memorable moments with my little 2-year-old so far is when we've like gotten through something
Yeah,
together, when
sure.
it's like figuring out how to suck the boogers out of his
Yeah.
nose, or
Yes.
get him used to something that anything else that he's not into doing.
Yeah.
And I just, again, I appreciated you guys talking about that sort of that real world um, stuff,
Yeah.
that is what you're mired in as a new parent. And so much of it is marketing and baby
Yeah.
gear based. Anyway, go listen to the podcast. It's a good one.
Yeah,
It's a great
that
episode.
episode was called "To Do Today's New Moms Have It Easier or Harder," I think.
Yeah.
And Yeah, that was a fun conversation. And I think you're right. It's not all or nothing. If somebody could not get their baby to settle down and a really pricey, well-marketed gadget had that exact right, like rocking back and forth, I am not here to say that I would not have gone that
Right.
route. When you are desperately want to solve a problem, the gadgets and the solutions are there. But
Yeah.
it
And
does
I'm not
like,
saying we don't have gadgets. We have
yeah,
gadgets. Just
yeah,
don't get me
yeah,
wrong.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, that actually reminds me. There's a in the description of the video. There's a link to a Spotify playlist that Sarah put together for new listeners to the Mom Hour. That'll kind of get you going because
Yeah, I just kind of picked some. We have over 700, like you said.
right.
And
Yeah.
yeah, so I picked some that I think make a good entry to get to know us.
Okay. Great. Well, you mentioned this at the top, Sarah. You moved back to you grew up here. You grew up in Santa Barbara, moved away, moved back. First, let's talk. I mean, let's talk about that. I mean, you have what are the ages of your kids?
They're 15, 13, and 11 now. We moved back 3.5 years ago. So they were 12, 10, and 7 when we
Okay.
moved back. So
So,
yeah,
so
not
what was
tiny.
no, not tiny. You're kind of midstream,
Yeah.
and you came back. So how's that been? How's that transition been? You have an interesting perspective of being a local and
Yeah.
now local again. So what's
Yeah.
that been like?
It's one of the wildest like twists to my adult life that I didn't wasn't in the plan. It was a COVID move, as so many people's moves were.
Sure.
Um, I was away for 22 years, and by the time I moved back, I had all warm fuzzies for my hometown, but no experience raising kids here, and especially having little kids here. My kids weren't born here; they didn't go through the PEP classes and the preschool programs, and so in a way, we feel very new still. They had to start new schools and meet new friends, and yet in this place that's deeply familiar to me, to the point that like I have kids who go to schools that I went to and play at playgrounds that I played on. And so that part of it, I guess, being a 40 something already, like the time passing feels so crazy. And then you're sort of like physically being in the place where I grew up with my kids is wild. Maybe wouldn't sound wild to somebody who's done it that way the whole time, but because it was a like you said, a move midstream, it's been pretty crazy. But I'm very grateful to be back. I think I've said to you offline before, Santa Barbara presents a lot of challenges, and it does, but moving back, I have mostly still those warm fuzzies for where we live. And yeah, I find myself kind of contrasting. I've lived in a couple of very suburban sprawl type locations and raised kids in those types of places. And there's some real advantages to having a Target on, every corner and a drive-through Starbucks on every corner. But I find myself loving that we have a little bit more of like a walkable downtown and quirky neighborhoods and real historical significance in town. A ton of arts organizations that feels more like a city larger than we are, to be able to
Mhm.
go see the opera and the musicals. And so I have romanticized Santa Barbara probably for a long time. And I mean, it's mostly living up to the romance, raising my kids here.
Right, right on. Um, well, now that you have tweens and teens, I know a topic you've been thinking about for maybe a potential story for us is spring break at home with your teens and tweens. What do you do if
I
you're
know.
not traveling?
I
How do
know.
you how do you fill the days? And
Ah,
that's got to be a big question for folks as spring break looms. So,
yeah.
what kind of things do you guys do these days, maybe on the weekend that might translate to spring break, and what are some ideas for folks out there?
Yeah, well, this is going to sound really nerdy, Tyler, but as my kids get older, I really am looking at what kinds of life skills and skills do they have of being like a citizen of a town or a city. And so I really use school breaks to be like, what can we do that isn't part of our regular routine? Like,
Hmm,
can we go to the art museum? Can we take a day trip somewhere? I Last summer I made my then 14 and 12-year-old master the city bus system and kind of like helped them learn that.
that's a great
I
idea.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that it's all work and no play on a break, but I do think we live in this very culturally rich, obviously naturally rich place. And when you have tweens and teens, life gets really busy with school and activities. So I do think that time where we live, figuring out how it works, figuring out like seeing something we haven't seen before, playing tourist in your own hometown, taking a day trip. So those are the kind of things we do. We love the public libraries. We go to the library a lot, usually at the beginning of every school break. So those are the things rattling around in my head right now.
I mean, we actually have a story in this week's issue about the library and all the programs they have for
So
kids.
many.
So many.
I'm like an unofficial library PR person. They don't pay. I love
They'll
our
appreciate
libraries.
that. Yeah, I mean, I've been blown away learning about stuff constantly. It's like it's so much more than
Yes.
the library. I mean, you could
Yes.
check out passes to the Botanic Garden or like stargazing
3D printers.
3D printers, and that's all stuff you can check out. But then they have these amazing programs for new parents to get your kids, singing, dancing with a group, which is fun, but we all know is great for the stimuli, and it's just I'm always happy to plug them too.
Yeah.
So it's a great place. It's just a great place to go. Our East Side branch downtown, Goleta's got an awesome one. It's a resource I think people maybe overlook or not realize that it's all free too.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because back to the spring break at home, our family took a big trip over winter break and it was quite expensive. And I'm already looking ahead to spring break and be like, I think we're staying home and not spending quite as much money. And we live in a place where there is plenty to do without spending a ton of money. The cost of living here is very high, but we also are pretty well resourced in those city programs. So I think plug for Indy. Indy's a great way to find out what's happening around town.
Yep. Okay. And something else I wanted to ask Sarah, as you're navigating these teen and tween years, what's something that's come up recently that you maybe hadn't foreseen as being a challenge or an opportunity or something fun with kids your age?
Well, there's so much happening so fast, especially in the high school years. But my oldest child just got his learner's permit from the old DMV. I don't think I had been in the Santa Barbara DMV since I got my learner's permit. So another one of those like deja vu. So thinking about having a kid driver is daunting in a whole bunch of ways. It's a little frightening, but it's also exciting. I think one of the real joys of parenting older kids and teens is seeing them step into independence, hopefully safely, hopefully, without too much giving us too many heart attacks. But yeah.
How are you guys doing it? I mean, are you throwing them straight into the deep end? Are you doing parking lots first? What's been your strategy?
Yeah, so far very slowly. A few circles around the parking lot, a quiet residential neighborhood, but I think we're just about ready to start actually being out on the road with other drivers. That is probably when those mom brakes or like the mom seatbelt will really really kick in.
Have you guys done a podcast yet on driving kids?
Not specifically kids driving. We've done a couple on cars and driving kids around and how much driving we do as moms and time in the car and road trips. I feel like we've done a lot of episodes that are driving adjacent, but Megan's kids are older than mine. She's now been through it a few times. I'm just on my first driver. So that's a good idea. I think we'll have to add that to the list. Yeah.
Just do's and don'ts that come up for you. I got to imagine that's one that people are just kind of jumping into. Maybe emulating what their parents did. Or just winging it.
It's so much more than, the driving is obviously important, but I was struck with how navigating a system like the DMV and filling out an application and knowing like what your passport is or what your ID is. And I really try to be pretty hands off about those things with my kids and let them figure out, fail, do it wrong. We got sent home from the DMV the first time because we didn't have the right like proof of residency. And I'm not always great at it, but I try to let my kids lead in situations like that, like learning to take the bus or learning to, fill out a DMV application, as opposed to do it for them. So there's not just learning to drive, but it's actually learning like how to be I guess, a pre-grown up in our
Right.
society.
Be a
Yeah.
citizen.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yep. Um, when we talk about, I'm backing up a little bit here, but
Yeah,
I still am just thinking about the double-edged sword aspect of today's today's parenting versus
totally.
15, 20 years ago. And one of the things I found interesting from that episode too was how it's so easy to look up things on your phone that it sometimes it makes it what am I trying to say? You forget to talk to people. You
Yeah,
forget to approach someone and ask them,
yeah,
what bag they're carrying or what pediatrician maybe they
yeah.
recommend, or anything like that. And I've found myself having to consciously at playgrounds or picking my son up from preschool, like look up from the rush and the
Hmm.
gear and the bags and like try to have that interactive conversation with people. I mean, at one hand, it's very nice to be able to look up any
Yeah,
kind of question you may have, but um, it's I'm just yeah. What have you noticed in your day to day with
yeah.
kids your age? I mean, is that just little kids, or do you think that's a phenomenon for teens and parents of teens and tweens too?
I think I think it is a phenomenon actually throughout. I just think it's where our technology has evolved too. And I think in the episode Megan called it like we no longer have plausible deniability. Like you're not
Uh-huh.
allowed to not know something anymore as a parent because resources and information are everywhere and
Right,
in your pocket and in your phone, and that is really good. And there's some, especially if you're dealing with a specific medical issue or a child with a very specific set of needs, like what a gift to have to be able to connect with information and other parents via the internet. So it's not all bad or all good, but I guess we kind of wondered in that episode if we've a little bit lost the ability to just not know something, just be like,
right,
well, I'm just going to head out and hope this play place is open even though it's Martin Luther King Day. I guess if not, we'll like go get a Starbucks. Like we
right.
know I find myself obsessively finding out if things are open or what time they open, especially after COVID, because so
Totally.
many like there was no guarantees. And as a mom, if you're like getting 3 kids into the car and we promised them ice cream and we're gonna go here, and it's just like once upon a time, you just would have arrived somewhere and there would be a sign on the door like,
Right.
we're closed today, and then you would pivot. So yeah,
And
I don't think it's a new parent problem. I think it's a 2024
yeah,
challenge. I will say that back to the hyper local thing of being not just a parent but a Santa Barbara parent,
yeah,
I think that's our save. I think that's what will save us because not everything hyper local is well documented online. I know there are parent groups and Facebook groups and stuff, but I do think that's actually that's a good thing. We live in a town where we can be like, hey, who's your pediatrician, or
totally.
like, what are your kids doing for camp this summer? And we have publications like Indy and things like that.
Yeah, yeah.
So
I mean, and I can say for my wife and myself, one of the best resources so far has been like the Facebook moms group, like the Santa Barbara Facebook moms
okay,
group. And it's a great source of up to date information on stuff, what's open, what's closed,
right,
where to avoid lines, where to park to get to this show, that kind of thing. Because yeah, even though all that open closing info is online on Google, it's so often inaccurate that
yeah,
and you can't. It's hard to call anyone
yeah,
anymore.
yeah.
So it's
No
like,
one answers the phone. I know.
yeah.
Oh,
So
really?
that's definitely an upside, at least for us so far
Yeah.
in the modern parenting age.
And I think as long as that information sharing comes with some real life connection, like you said, that you are also meeting people and connecting in real life, then it's additive. Then it's supplementing our confidence as parents. But yeah, in that episode, we did kind of look at that. It's a slippery slope.
Yep, totally. What do you got cooking story wise for us? We mentioned maybe a couple things, the teens and tweens piece, and then but for the podcast too, you guys kicking around any ideas?
We just recorded today, which will not be out till early February, an episode about this concept of motherly love. February, everybody talking about love. And
Mhm.
again, in the way we do like to pick apart cliches and kind of look at of course we love our kids as moms. That's a given. But what does it really look like? How do we show love to our kids? How do we feel loved by our kids, especially as they're getting older? They don't want to hold our hand necessarily, but they're still showing love. So that was kind of a fun one that we recorded just
Cool.
today. It'll be out in early February.
Okay, right on. And then tell me about your guided gratitude journal you guys got coming
Yeah.
out this spring. That sounds neat.
Yeah, so we were approached by a publisher and worked to put together a journal for moms who don't have time to journal and don't want to say, Dear Diary, like I went to the park again, went to the library story time again. This idea of journaling can get tricky in motherhood because in some ways the days are all kind of the same and they all blur together. But at the same time, your kid is changing so fast and you have all of these feelings. I know I had a lot of trouble figuring out if I wanted to keep a journal and what that would even look like when I had small kids. So this journal is really fun. It has some different kind of templated pages that allows you to just jot down little things that happen throughout the day, almost like a slice of life of what your current parenting life is like right now. It guides people to thinking about little moments they're grateful for, even when things are hard. We have some really fun, like quick lists where like it'll prompt you to list really quickly 7 smells that are dominating my parenting life right now, or like 6 things I found in the trunk of my car. These are what we like now with older kids. When you look back, it's really more of the everyday details of parenting life that kind of
Mhm.
bring back all those memories. And we've got a bazillion pictures and photos, so there's that as well. But we designed this really to be a very approachable and not too overthinky way to keep a journal when you're especially in those early years of motherhood. So
Yep.
that'll be out March 5th, and it's called The Mother's Gratitude Journal. Here's a subtitle: An Easy Guide to Capturing Everyday Joys and Milestone Moments.
I think that's great. When my mom visited recently, she brought a wall calendar that she had on the wall
Oh,
for my first year, and she would write something in every day with like her perfect teeny tiny
uh-huh.
handwriting. And those were like some of the funniest, sweetest moments
Yeah.
that I think we we had as a team in those early days.
Yeah.
And but she was limited by like literally like a 1 inch,
Yeah.
1 inch square for each day. So
It's
I think
kind of like limited is better sometimes. If you're faced
Mhm.
with a big blank page, there's so many feelings about
Yeah,
parenting.
yeah.
And you also live under this delusion that you're going to remember it. Like you with a toddler, you're like, well, I'm always going to remember the way
Nope.
he said these words or like his favorite
Right.
cup, and you will not.
And as much as you want to, and as much in those
Yeah.
moments, you're like, "This, oh my god, that's in my brain forever." But it's just you
It
gotta make
gets
room for new
it's like
stuff.
replaced. It's like
Yeah,
delete and replace. It's being saved over by the new stuff.
right.
And so you'd be blown away by what you'll forget. So
Yeah,
yeah, it was fun to put together, and it'll be out everywhere March 5th.
great. Well, Sarah, I think we'll leave it at that. Thank you again for coming on the show, our
My
inaugural
pleasure. Thanks for having
episode.
me.
Yeah. And again, everyone listen to the Mom Hour. Check it out. Check out Sarah's stories in our issues. Again, she did one on photographers. What was your first piece? I was just
It
thinking
was a
about it.
roundup of podcasts, other podcasts
Right.
besides mine that
Yep.
won't make you feel crappy about your parenting, including mine, which is also
Yep.
in that list.
That was great. Non-judgmental. There are
Yeah.
no easy answers, but let's talk about it
Yeah.
and hash it out together.
Yeah.
And yeah, we'll keep chatting.
Thanks, Tyler. Thanks for
Thanks,
having
Sarah.
me.
Take care.